Welcome to part 2. We are going to start draping. In the previous video, we prepared our fabric for draping. So now we're going to actually go onto the form. So we'll start with the back. We're going to first pin our fabric, which has all of our amazing markings on the fabric, onto the form. And we want to make sure that we are pinning on and paying attention to where all of those landmarks are that we just created. So we're going to start with the center back. Starting at center back neckline is where I pin, and you always want to pin into the fold. If you pin this way, I'll show you what happens. So if you pin, kind of that way, what happens is the fabric actually moves. Can you see that? I think I can bring it closer. So if it's not pinned in, the fabric moves. So we want it to go into the fabric like that so that it doesn't move. All right. So we're going to pin down center front, or center back. And again, making sure that everything is aligning with those landmarks that we just worked so diligently to find and mark. Again, pinning in and making sure, of course, that the center back is also aligned. And again, if there's a little bit of a gap, that's okay. It depends on your fit a little bit. So you want to just go ahead and pin down. Remember, when we're draping, we're trying to get the shape of what we're actually designing. So we do want to have it hang in certain ways. And so draping can get tricky when it doesn't fit the form super tightly or, kind of fitted. And so, if something is hanging, we want to try and mimic that as best we can. So I'm just going to pin into here about there to kind of give that a little bit of space. We'll see. And then we also want to pin along the shoulder line, as well as along the hip line. Now, if you remember in the last demonstration, we gave it a 1/2 inch ease. So there is going to be a little bit of movement here. And so we want to distribute that by kind of pinning along those two lines and creating a little bit of space. So what we're going to start with is by going into the cross marks. So wherever the side seam is crossing the hip line, that's where I'm going to pin into the line itself. So going that way into the side seam again. So that way the fabric doesn't move. And I'll distribute that in a minute. I'm just going to kind of go up along the side seam now. So we want this to follow the side seam up until it gets to the underarm area. So we want to pin into the waist, into even a middle hip here. So when we're doing draping, pinning, it's, you don't have to go crazy and do like a ranch. That's a lot. You want to feel it out and see what works for you. Every few inches is usually good. You don't want to scrimp too much either, though. And again, you really want to make sure that those lines are aligning, and you can feel some of the seam lines on the form underneath, and that helps. So when we do the shoulder line, we just want to make sure we're kind of keeping everything straight through here. And then you can pin along that shoulder line. And again, you will have a little bit of ease. So we don't want to pull this over. We want this to kind of continue up straight. And that's how you can find where that shoulder line should fit. So again, there may be a little bit of ease through here. You can also determine a little bit of that, how much you want. So again, that's a nice thing about draping, is you are kind of the one to decide what's happening. Just pull this up just a little bit. All right. And so what you'll notice is you do have extra, because we do have space for a dart. And so what we're going to do is start to find where that dart should be placed. And that's going to be determined by the princess line. My form has some like not so strong markings. A lot of things are kind of, so I have to make sure. So here's the princess line. And what you're going to do is you're going to feel along, make sure you don't pull this over. And we do want to pin into the hip line, but we can kind of try and I'll demonstrate this, just the feeling of it out first, and then I'll actually pin it in. So we want to go along the waistline and find that princess line. When you find that, you're going to pull up and push the fabric towards the center back, creating a dart. And I'm just gonna temporarily kind of plug this in right here. Just a temporary pin. So it's all kinds of wrinkly. We're going to get some of these some of this movement out. I like to call them rainbows, and move them a little down. Before I do that though, I do want to distribute some of the ease of this on my hip line and making sure that my hip line is actually staying on grain. So I'm going to go through, maybe give a little bit of space over here, giving that 1/2 inch ease somewhere to go. And again, making sure that hip line stays plumb. There we go. So at the side seam now, what you'll also notice is that we've got a little bit of extra here. And so we're going to pull some of that out. So I'm going to kind of tug at this a little bit on our side seam to smooth out that nicely. And again, you know, I'm looking for a little bit of fit, but we don't want to, you know, go too crazy. It depends on what your design is, I suppose. So kind of once this line is off, don't worry, we're going to actually remark a new side seam. So just kind of want to make sure that things are falling where we want them to fall. I'm just going to take a little bit of that out. And then I'm going to refine this dart again. And what I might do is put in a temporary pin at center back. The diagram in the book does not show a pin there, but I kind of want it to stay put because I don't want to pull that center back in. If I pull that off of the center back, then it's going to throw the whole design off. What'll happen is it'll be too tight because it'll be missing fabric in that area. So we want to smooth down our dart, and it should be following relatively close to the princess line. If you can feel that, and you can roll the dart into place so that it does lay nice and smooth. You see how I kind of am working the fabric. It might not happen immediately. It might, you know, take some time, and it doesn't always lay totally flat or right on the line. We will true this like we true regular patterns after we get it off the form. So anything here where you're seeing, you know, like I said, these rainbows or this excess fabric, you're going to want to try and smooth that out and figure out how to incorporate that into the dart in a nice way. So be careful again that we're not pulling anything too far off of where it's supposed to be. And again, this should also follow relatively close to the princess line. So if you can kind of, it's not that we're cheating it, but we want to kind of align that and make sure. So sometimes you have to kind of move it over to where it from where it originally fell, like that. Yeah. And then we're going to pin some of that down. And something about draping is that, you know, you pin it down. It definitely doesn't have to be the last pin. You know, move it around. This is a sculpture. It's a work in progress. And so you want to be able to, it's hard from that angle. And you want to be sure to understand that if you're pinning into the form, especially with darts, you're going to eventually want to pin them into the garment itself, which will when we actually true up the drape before we create patterns, I'll show you how to do that. But just to keep in mind that this is not the final dart or anything. This is our first version of it. And like I said, some of this will ease out. You know, we do want a little bit of extra ease in the jacket. We don't want it to be too fitted. But if that's bothering you, or if you do want a really fitted jacket, you can get this in there into the dart if you keep molding it and trying. So like I said, you know, I might push a little bit more through here, close up this dart so that it's nice and smooth. So that's our back, at least this part. And now we want to also, we have to create a shoulder dart. So So what we want to do is we're going to follow along the neckline until that is all solidified. So the way that we do that, we actually have to clip, because what happens is, if you notice, it kind of creates all these pulls. And so what we're going to do is go inch by inch around the neckline. So the first one we're going to go from center back and smooth it. We put a little pin in, and we're going to clip, but you want to clip above, about a ½ inch from where that neckline is. Don't get too close. I like these scissors. We don't want to get too close because we are going to need that line, the integrity of that line to stay, but we also do want that, if you notice, it opens right up and kind of creates a space for this to move around that neckline. And so I'm going to put another pin in 1 inch from there. I feel like I should raise you up more. So we're going to go another inch following along from that pin, put it into the neckline. And then I'm going to cut again another, staying well away from that neckline. And you want to do that until you reach your shoulder neckline intersection. So that's right here. And that's where our pattern is going to go to. Obviously, that's where the fabric would go to on a jacket. And so then we want to come nice up and around here. So the shoulder line should be there. And what you'll notice is there should be a little bit of extra fabric in here. And so that's going to be your shoulder dart. And so I'm going to temporarily pin down right here. And then what I'm going to do is find my princess line, which is right here. Same thing, following along my finger until from that neckline, smoothing that, find that pinch up, push the excess fabric towards center back, and then roll that dart into place and put a pin in. Again, maybe making some adjustments on your sculpture and making sure that this stays smooth. And these should relatively align, but again, we will true them. So if they do, fantastic. If they're a little off, we can also play with them a little bit. So this should be nice and smooth. We want to put a pin in where the shoulder line is, right there, like that. All right, and then, like I said, now I might move my dart from down here a little bit so that it's in line with this. And you can, especially because we're kind of exploring the princess line, and we will actually need this princess line anyway, marked for our facing and linings and things like that. It's nice to have this line kind of demarcated. Right, so again, kind of adjusting some of this through the torso. All right, so now what we can do is mark up the entire thing. So we want to be very thorough when we're marking, and we want to be very accurate. Otherwise, this is kind of a moot point, right? Doing all of this work. So we have to mark all of the lines of the boundaries of the garment, right? So the dart line, the neckline, the shoulder line, the armhole, the side seam, the lower part of the dart, and anything that might be important for us. So I like to kind of go in a clockwise fashion and then check the inside of the garment and make sure I've gotten everything. And again, we want to make sure that this is, basically the fit and look that we're trying to achieve. And so make sure that, when you mark all this, we'll be able to adjust stuff, but this is about, so I'm going to start at the neckline. We already have our center back neckline. And what I want to do is I'm going to go along making little dash marks in pencil. Please don't use pen on the important lines. And you can use the lines on the mannequin as your reference point. You can take some pins out, but make sure that, everything is being marked according to the form itself. Like I said, my form has some bad lines, so this is very difficult. Make sure you cross mark wherever two lines intersect. It's very important to cross mark. So I'm going along right now on the shoulder seam, Again, checking where my actual seam line is on the dress form and marking along that. Whenever I mark a dart, so here I have the 2 legs of my dart. You have to mark both sides of the fabric. So the folded part of the dart as well as where that fold hits. And then you definitely want to do a few little dots, again, on both legs of the dart until you get to the tip of the dart, which for here, I'm going to say, and make a cross mark right here is about at that shoulder line. I'm going to leave that for now. Anywhere that's straight, you don't have to mark along the whole thing. Again, you just have to get to those cross marks that are important. And when we get to the armhole, we're going to mark around the arm plate. So make sure you kind of pull the fabric in a little bit and let it come away from that. Now, our armhole is way too high to be, at the actual arm plate, but it's a good landmark for us to start with. So you mark that, and then you also want to give a nice big notch on that, on the bust line, and that should be still on that side seam. From after that, I have it straying. I can feel it, and it's coming down a little away. So I'm just doing little dots. I'm going to true these lines on the table afterwards. And then a big cross mark here would be the waistline. So I'm going to cross mark the waistline, continuing to mark on this side seam hip line until it then crosses over back into the original side seam marking that we had. So it comes and meets that. We'll true this up with a hip curve in a minute. And then I'm going to come and mark my dart. So again, a nice big cross mark at the end of the dart, and then I just do little dashes about a ½ inch away from each other. You don't want to go crazy because these are going to change, so you don't want to draw full lines. We're gonna true these darts. They might move a little bit. Again, here I have a nice cross mark where my waist is, so make sure wherever, again, there is some big landmark. So here's a waistline. You kind of demarcate that. You want that to be obvious. And with these darts, what I'm looking for is make sure that they're not huge lines. And when you connect them and true them, that you're connecting exactly where those two little dashes start, not where they end. Then it will be different. Or, be very diligent about it being dots. Some people have different systems for doing this. And this one's kind of going all the way up again, kind of cross marking here for it to end, giving a little bit. All right, so that should be our entire garment. If you want your hemline to be below where you have the hip line, like I said, I kind of measured here for my garment, so my piece might be longer. If you are going to have a longer garment, you can measure, kind of create a 2-inch or something, down here if you want it to be a little longer. So but you want to kind of decide on that at this point. So now we want to true up our drape. And so we're going to actually remove it from the form at this point, as long as you have all of your cross marks, and you might want to double, triple, quadruple check that, because once it's off the form, you no longer have that same fit, and it's not hard to get this all set up again, but as you see, it is a little bit time consuming to go back and forth a lot. So you want to try and check everything, make sure everything's marked. In fact, I'm going to mark my center back there, waistline as well. Removing your darts. Okay. So now we're going to take this to the table. We're going to true up all of our lines. So first, I'll start at the neckline. True up your neckline, and you can use, a different color if that's helpful. Do that for you. So there's our neckline. I have some cross marks for the first part of the shoulder. second part, and then we have our dart. And so we want to just mark in, I'm going to mark in my waistline here. Okay. And I'm going to put in my side seam as well. Smooth this a little bit. And the armhole. And again, this is the arm plate, so we will need to alter this, but we are just trying to get our all right, so when you find the dart, you're going to just kind of, we're going to true the dart, just find the center of the dart that you have marked. So mine is 2.5 inches, that's 1 1/4. Now we're gonna connect the first leg. So we're gonna connect each first dart leg just to create a line for that princess line. It's going to go off from your marks a little, but we're going to true these darts up. So we're going to pay attention to the first dart here, but we're actually going to true this to be a little less, more like a 1/2 inch dart here. And we want it to be 3 inches long on that line. So you can go ahead and mark 3 inches and then true that dart up. Now, we want these legs to match. So we want to make sure they're both 3 inches long. So this one's 3 inches, but this one is a little longer. So I'm going to come in here, true up this line. So now when you fold this closed, it should match perfectly. So I'm actually going to create a pink line just so I know. Okay. We're going to now true the waist dart. So we found the center. We're going to do a little bit of a smaller dart than what we draped. We're going to actually do, we'll do 1.5 inches, so 3/4 of an inch on either side. Standard would be 1 inch. I'm going to square up with my dart from the waistline. So the center should go straight up and down, perpendicular to the waistline. And so we have that new bottom dart leg right here. We can move that over just a tiny bit to be on that line, center line. And then true the other leg up from the bottom. And now we're going to connect that to the top of the dart. It should be about 7 inches above the waistline and 4 inches below. So can true it and just see how we did. So I'm going to kind of go a little bit longer than that. And then down here, the 4 inches. Yeah, I'll leave that one down there, I think. So I'm going to come with a new dart tip here. Maybe I will raise this up just just 1.5 inches or so at the bottom. All right, so now what we want to do is fold this and pin it to itself like it's a garment and put it onto the form to check our fit. So when we're doing that, we're going to fold our dart on one leg and crease it, and then pin into the fold, especially wherever anything is crossing. So right here at the shoulder seam, we want to pin, and then we want to go into the dart, and you want to do about every inch. This is a very narrow dart, so I'm going to go ahead and you can go vertical for that. And there's not a lot of long way to go, but we do want to go to the tip of the dart. So make sure you put one last pin in that tip. And so we're mimicking what it's going to look like sewn. And so the next thing we're going to do is try the lower dart. So again, we want the excess of the dart to go towards the center. So where that crosses, I'm going to go ahead and pin in here and then fold on that line, making sure that your lines that you marked are matching up, and be careful that you're using the right lines. I know I have a couple of extra lines on mine, which is a little confusing, and again, I'm pinning every 1.5 to 2 inches or so. And as I get closer, especially on the darts, it's kind of important to keep pinning a little bit because you really want to mimic what the garment is going to do. So you want to, if there's too many gaps, then it doesn't really translate. All right. And then the bottom of the dart, same thing, folding on those legs. And this is helping us to make sure that our darts are accurate and balanced. And again, always kind of pinning into these folds, making sure your pins are accurate, because if everything's moving, it's not going to work. And then we also want to fold. We can fold over. If you would like to, you can add basically like an inch seam allowance around some of this, but you want to make sure that you leave at least an inch, because if you cut this away, you kind of can't get it back. So I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of seam allowance here. And for the side seam, I'm just going to kind of slit in here, just cutting away a little bit of the excess. This is not really seam allowance, but just kind of leaving a little excess in case we have to make some adjustments, but also clipping away stuff so that we can work with the piece a little bit better. And so what we want to do is fold over where those seams are going to be and actually place it onto the form so we can see how things are going to fit. So starting with the neckline here, going to fold over, and you can take this to the iron and press it and really kind of explore this a little bit, because this is where we're checking stuff. And so if there are adjustments before you end up going into a toile, this is where you want to make them. And again, being very certain to make sure that wherever you're folding and pinning, that it is accurate, because if it's not, then there's no sense in doing this. Probably could leave the neckline out, but that helps. Folded along the shoulder line. And here we don't want to pin too much into the body, not as much as we were when we were draping, because we want to check the fit. So again, here, folding and pinning at important landmarks. So at the cross mark of the waist here, I'm pinning into the side seam, and then up here into the side seam, and down here at the hip line to check that fit. And then of course at center back. And again, you can leave center back to float if you wanted to check that. So you can see that now we can actually see how this is going to maybe fit. Definitely going to want to be taking down some of the armholes and things like that when we get there.